Yes. The movie is James Wan's Malignant. So, Malignant is a horror film that's a tribute to classic campy B horror films. I think it's the best place to start. Malignant may look on its face like a few of James Wan's other horror films, like Insidious or The Conjuring, or maybe even Saw, right? The thing that really kicked off his career. And in a lot of ways, it's like those films. But in a few ways, it's drastically different. And unfortunately, the ways in which it's different, we can't really talk about because we don't really do spoilers on this show. So I'll do my best to kind of toe around the loose summary. And I think Andy and I will do our best to kind of talk around it. But I should say before we get into it, Malignant is it's not quite what it seems. there's something happening in this movie that is hidden under the surface, and you kind of have to go see it and get into it to find out what that is, and we're going to talk about it here. So Malignant is the story of, I don't remember her name. What is our lead's name?
Madison.
To be fair, it was like we saw this a couple weeks ago and we had this weird hiatus, so I apologize for that. Yes, it's the story of Madison, this young woman who just has nothing going her way. She is sad, and she has I think a boyfriend, maybe a husband, who is not kind to her, and she does not have a lot of friends, and she's like clearly going through some kind of depression, but she starts having these manic dream state episodes where she sees this trench coat, like hooded, can't really get a good look at him, killer murdering people in horrible fashion. But these visions, they're not just simply visions. She in some weird way like transports in like a dimension thing to be a part of this universe, and she's like tangibly at these scenes when these people are getting murdered, and vice versa. This killer can seemingly step into her world as well. The trailer shows some of this. They do some graphic CGI stuff, like the world kind of melts away, and ultimately she has to uncover like the mystery behind these dreams, find out whether or not these killings are actually happening, and if they are, ideally put a stop to them. I feel like saying this as the summary is like I said, just kind of scratching the surface.
Yeah.
So Andy,
definitely the setup.
Yeah, with that setup in mind, what did you think of Malignant?
So it's interesting because I watched this at home, and when it gets started, it has a really kind of bizarre opening scene.
Very bizarre.
And it had some really kind of strange dialogue, and it was initially really, really cliche, really paint by number, really, and in somewhat weird ways over the top. Like the boyfriend is super abusive out of nowhere.
Yes.
You feel like you're watching a Lifetime movie, to quote Red Letter Media. At the beginning, yeah. It's bizarre in that way, and then these murders start happening. Madison is the kind of prime suspect, it kind of turns into a little bit of a cop procedural. Cops come out and be like, well, you were here when these murders happened. What did you see? Like, you're suspect number one. And it hits all these really, really, just common beats that we've seen. And I got really bored out. I was a little sleepy when I was watching this, and about an hour in, I was like, I have to go lay down. So I went and like took a nap, and then, and I was right. And I was bored as well. And like I said, it's hitting all these really, like, I'm rolling my eyes through all of this, and I'm just like, oh gosh, where's this going to go? And then kind of the last 30 minutes go absolutely off the rails. Like, it turns into something completely unforeseen, and that the beginning did not prepare you for. And the trailer, like I said, the trailers kind of do a bait and switch, but in a good way. And in my opinion, it kind of redeems the whole movie, because now I really know what it is. It's not serious horror. It's much more of like a campy B movie with this kind of really crazy premise, and then like the action in the last third is just like, it's insane, and it really makes up for the rest of it being so ridiculous. And when I was first watching it, I was like, this is bad. This is like The Room bad. Like, this is drinking game. Get your friends together.
Like this is James Wan's worst film. Bad. Yeah. Like, this is bad. Yes.
Pour shots and, decide when you're gonna, take them. And but then, like I said, it kind of goes crazy in the last third, and I'm not going to say any more than that for spoiler reasons. But it definitely kind of, for me, it made up for the rest of it being pretty lackluster.
Yeah. I'm in a unique position. I don't feel the same way. I did not like this movie. I was bored through the first two acts, and act three, where things turn on their head. Um, did not redeem it for me. I was just like, no, like, just okay. You made a half hour of a good movie and
I said,
stuck up
"Good day,
behind an
sir."
hour 20 of a terrible film. Like, that does not work out for me. That doesn't pass the smell test. I've since revisited it. Andy referenced the Red Letter Media review. People have been writing articles about this, and they're all over the board. Roger Ebert's site, they gave this 1 star. They were like, "This film is trash, and it's one of Juan's worst." Meanwhile, you have other reviewers who are giving it 4, and they're saying this is like a brilliant like tribute to B movie horror, and Juan is doing something really inventive here on a big blockbuster budget. I don't know. I wish I think I see that side of the argument, but I don't see it in the film. And I'd probably need to watch it again to really get back to it. I think Andy makes a good point. I watched this at home as well. Probably a mistake. This probably should have been a theatrical film. I think I may have been able to get into it more, or I may have walked out because I would have been like, "This is terrible." So let's talk about it, Andy. Why is the first 2/3 of this film feel really bad?
Well, I mean, a number of reasons. First off, like I said, it's kind of paint by number. You have like, let me think. You have home trauma. You have haunted house. You have detective procedural. You got faceless
Domestic abuse,
yeah,
generic killer, yes.
faceless killer, mental hospital escape, like over like in our main character, yeah, the beginning is just really bizarre. So it hits all these really cliche points. This relationship with her husband is super. It's over the top abusive. It's like way too. It keeps reminding me of this bit that SNL does with like the movie about racism. And there's one scene where like the guy is just so overtly racist. It's just like no one. Well, I'm not like that guy. It's kind of like.
Right.
Yeah, so this relationship with their boyfriend is just like unbelievably abusive. But then you also have like this masked killer, but then she's kind of seen visions of it. Reminds me actually a little bit of the original Candyman, where she's like the person is there, sees it, is kind of part of it, and then is also suspected to be the suspect number one because of it.
Yeah.
And then there's just also really weird campy decisions like. So Madison has a sister that shows up named Sydney, who's they're kind of like Nancy Drew trying to figure this thing out. But then there's also this weird semi romance between the lead detective, who's like way too attractive to be a detective. But there's a weird like attraction between her sister and him, and then also like his CSI like person that like she's like trying to and there's these really awkward like romantic gestures out of nowhere, and then they don't go anywhere. They don't actually like develop into anything. So there's just like I said, it's bland, it's cliche, it's boring, and but then it really turns around.
Right.
For me, that's what's the difference. Go on.
So let me expound on. I think I can explain this in a way that isn't like revealing to what's happening in the film. Really, the reason I think I've said, and Andy said, many people have said that this is like a tribute to campy B movie horror films, is because when you think of like B movie horror from like the 80s and the 70s and maybe even the 90s. Yeah, we're talking a little bit about things like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but we're also talking about like Sleepaway Camp and Fright Night and chopping mall, is that movie? Like horror films that like objectively are bad. They're bad movies. Like you would get together and drink beer and watch them with your friends. You wouldn't actually be spooked by them. You'd just be like, wow, these are kind of
low budget.
Yeah, like watching teens get chopped up, right? Like nothing exciting, like low budget, goofy blood effects, like nothing that's really blockbuster level. Well, James Wan, I think most people are speculating that that's what he was running towards in this film. He's actually trying to produce something like that here. Plot lines that don't really go anywhere, characters that have super cliche dialogue, like things happening in the film that don't fit any semblance of logic outside of just the supernatural horror stuff, like actual logical fallacies like that our characters are making, like just basically a bad movie. Like it feels a whole lot like he was setting out to make a bad movie, and people are saying like, oh, he was doing that as a tribute to previous bad horror films. That's what's going on here. And the third act does kind of come around in service of that. Like the events of the third act of this film, I think are some kind of bow on top of a present that is this tribute to B movie horror, like in camp, right? And maybe even schlock in certain cases, especially in our opening scene. That's really, really something else. But I don't think it works. I think it's just a bad horror film. I think it's obvious in the marketing. I mean, the poster has this like, if you're watching on Facebook Live, you can see the poster. We've got it up right now. It's got this kind of red theme and no real imagery behind it, because even Warner Brothers didn't know how to market this thing. The tagline is a new vision of terror. It's just like, no, it's not. It's not a new vision of anything.
It's
you
the
guys just
same-
didn't even know.
the
Yeah,
old
they didn't
vision
know
of
what the hell
terror.
they had. Like they had this thing and they were like, how do we make this
See,
into a marketable film? And like I think that's the stumble. People don't know what they're walking into here.
yeah, and that, well, in some ways, like they could have been more upfront about it, but then I think it would have. It kind of, it's a nice surprise when it
Yes.
kind of goes crazy at the end, because you're not expecting that. Again, it looks like something more along the lines of The Conjuring and Insidious, and the premise looks like it's almost like a sleep paralysis demon thing where she's frozen, and then but you can see visions of these murders happening, and so it kind of looks like it's going to be a murder mystery, and she's going to have to help the police track this guy down. And doesn't go that way at all. Here's the thing for me is that I would definitely rewatch this, and like I want to rewatch this in like a group, like with like unsuspecting victims to watch this with. Make like I could see myself like, I'm going to watch this once a year at Halloween with a group of friends and laugh about how bad the beginning is, and then like get your jaw drops in at the later half.
Yeah. I think I'm pretty in that camp as well. I'd be curious to see how people take this who had never seen it or really know where it's going. I think in this review, we've been pretty concise. I don't think we've really given a lot away. If anything, I think people who may not have had this film on their radar might be listening to us and be like, hold on, what the hell are they talking about? I got to go see this film. And I hope that's not misleading. Like I said, I was not that impressed by where this movie goes. Other people, meanwhile, have been like, my God, 4 stars. This film's incredible. I don't know, Andy, where do you land? I mean, are you firmly in the this is amazing? Are you this?
I don't think it's amazing. I think knowing what it is, knowing the kind of film it is now, makes it more acceptable. Like I think it would have been more palatable had you gone in knowing it was this sort of like B movie schlock, because that's what essentially the first 2/3 are. But you don't realize that's what's happening. It just seems bad.
Right.
For the sake of being bad, but it's when you know the kind of movie it is, then it totally makes sense. And I do think that I mean, I've seen a lot of horror movies, a lot of gore and violence on TV and the internet and in film,
Sure.
and I was still pretty shocked by kind of the action scenes at the end.
Yeah. I trying to think of the best way to wrap this up regarding performances. I know that's something we normally do in these reviews. We say, oh yeah, this actor was great or this actress was great. They're all no names. You don't know anybody in this movie.
I thought the lead, Annabelle Wallace, was really good, because she does kind of have to carry the majority of the movie.
I'm firmly in the other camp. I thought she was terrible in this film. And I don't know. And I don't know if that's by direction. Like, that's the thing. Like, I can't tell if James Wan is like, twirling his Dick Dastardly mustache and counting his Scrooge bucks, like McDuck dollars, or if he's like, this is the worst film I've made and this was a terrible mistake. I really don't know. I don't know I don't know if this is a brilliant performance or a terrible one. And ultimately, I think ambiguity does not save you in cinematic history. If people can't determine whether or not a film is good or bad pretty quickly, it gets swept under the rug for films to come. October looks like a huge slate. I don't know where this movie's going to be come next year. Are we getting a Malignant 2? I have no idea.
I mean, I will say about that, it did not, surprisingly, didn't really hit at the box office. Usually horror is kind of you can count on it. But it just made just over 5 million, so it didn't really find an audience there. It was available on HBO Max as well, so that might have contributed to it.
Both
But
of us watched it, yes.
but sometimes, sometimes it horror is usually a pretty good bet, especially during the pandemic. It seems to be that's the one thing people will come out for. So it seemed, and who knows why? Maybe it was word of mouth. Maybe it was just kind of mixed marketing. Who knows? But it didn't really find an audience.
I don't know. I think to kind of bring it full circle, I don't believe this film is some kind of wonderful, and a lot of people do, and it doesn't seem like it on its face. So I guess you gotta go see yourself and find out. Andy, you ready for recommendations?
I am.
Andy, would you recommend Malignant?
I would recommend it with some caveats. If you're a big horror fan and you like all things horror, serious B movies, slashers, everywhere in between, I'd say definitely come out and see this. It's definitely something to kind of add to the repertoire of horror movies that have come out this year. If that's not your thing, you might want to skip it. And I don't know. Again, if you can see it at home, just do that. And like I said, I think it's something that's going to kind of live on the way The Room has lived on. It's going to make a great Halloween drinking game every other year for that. So I would recommend it to probably hardcore horror fans.
I would not recommend it. I think there are a ton of other more exciting horror films you should be looking at. Not this one. I don't know. I look at this as a bit of a miss in Wan's category. If I was going to pick up a James Wan film off the shelf and watch it, I'd pick up Insidious, The Conjuring, or Saw any day before I'd grab this one. That's just me. I know it's doing something unique. I should sit on it. Andy made a great point. This would be a good watch in October, and I love watching horror films come October. Maybe not this year. Maybe next year. I'll come back to it fresh, real fresh. Now that I know what I'm getting into, and it might be a totally different scene, but like, I just didn't. It did not do it for me. I wish it had. I do, but that's me. So yeah.